Gary, where did you keep the gifts? I can't find them in the house. Oh, the gifts? I noticed a discomforting look on Gary's face. I affirmed, Yes, the gifts. What did you do with them? I sold them. What? Why the hell did you sell the gifts? I needed the money, so I sold them. Anyways, those gifts were of no use to you. Have you lost your mind? Those gifts were a relief to our pockets. Most of the gifts were essentials for the baby. Why are you creating such a scene out of these trivial things? Well, those gifts were gifted by my parents, so I can do anything with them. They are mine. Hello, my name is Molly. I'm a 34-year-old nurse married to Gary, who is a businessman. Gary has fishery farms where the fish is harvested and later exported to different places. Gary was a fun-loving, energetic man who was always so full of life. After my hectic hospital shift, I looked forward to spending my leisure time with Gary. Our life was moving smoothly for some time until Gary suffered a major loss in his business. The ship exporting the fish from Gary's farm overturned in a storm. Gary was a small businessman, and this loss was insufferable for him. He went into extreme depression. I tried to console him emotionally. Perhaps that was the only thing I could do to comfort him. I didn't have enough savings to help him recover from the loss. I cooked his favorite meals and took him out to his favorite pizza places and gaming parlor. I tried to comfort him as much as I could. Gary spent weeks lying on the couch and playing video games. We visited his farm for a few hours in the day and spent most of his time lounging on the couch, doing nothing. He didn't help me with the household chores either. It was difficult for me to manage the household chores after my stressful shift at the hospital. Being a nurse, I have to extend my shifts and sometimes work night shifts as well. Even on the days when I worked overtime, I cooked meals, cleaned the house, and did other household chores before calling it a day. Gary wouldn't bother to even clean his plates. To be honest, I was annoyed at this sight after a while. I might sound harsh, but these challenges were a part of business, and people dealing in these businesses should be aware of all the consequences. I have very limited business knowledge, but I understand that after a breakdown, one should get faster at his work, reanalyze and re-strategize the work instead of mourning over it. Wasting time on mourning over the loss would add nothing but more trouble for the business. Although I didn't say any of these to Gary, I gave him all the time he needed to nurse his loss. After a month or so, I mustered the courage to confront Gary on this matter. Hey Gary, I know you're feeling too low after that damage, but don't you think you should be moving on now? I mean, instead of mourning, shouldn't you focus on fixing things? Perhaps if you continue to have low spirits, things might get even worse for you. You're so insensitive and selfish. Molly, instead of being supportive of my situation, you are lecturing me about the business rules. Gary's reaction was very much expected, and I didn't mind those words. I knew he was feeling low, yet I wanted to put my thoughts to him. Honey, I know I might sound rude at this point, but I think you're damaging your business further by wasting this time, mourning over the last deal. Having said that, it's your business. I only wish good things for you. You know I love you. Gary was disgruntled by my words, but he preferred to plug in his earphones and concentrate on his video games. It took him more than a month to get back to his business schedule as usual. I felt relieved that finally things are getting normal. However, I noticed a gradual change in Gary's schedule. He had no routine for coming home. Sometimes he came after midnight and sometimes in the morning, and on some days he didn't come home at all. Whenever I inquired him about his odd routine, he would brush me off with his snarky response. Businessmen don't have shifts, you know. We are the owners of our time and work. His snarky response made me wonder about the reason for his growing arrogance. After a few months, Gary again suffered a loss, but this time he did not lounge on the sofa and mourn. Instead, He got moody and rough. The change was visible. He was no longer a happy-going person. He was more stressed, and for some reason, he was always in a hurry. God knows what he was up to. One day, Gary came up to me and asked me very politely, "Honey, I need some money to scale my business. I'm really in stress these days. Do you have any savings to spare?" I was shocked at this sudden ask. "Well, I've been running this house for the past many months after your business suffered that loss. Besides, I have lived my life on the edge, so I don't have enough savings." Yes, that's right. I was the kind of person who believed in enjoying my life to the fullest, at least in my 20s, so I spent most of my savings for traveling and exploring new places. My answer didn't go too well on Gary. He made a disgusted face. After a while, I too felt guilty for not helping him. I was saving as much as I could for a trip to Florida. I thought to myself, can't I sacrifice one trip for my husband? And the answer was yes, I can. Or rather, I should. As a married couple, we should help and support each other, so I decided to give the money which I was saving for my next trip to Florida. I was hopeful that he would pace up his business and things would be fine again. Unfortunately, that never happened. It was during this time I got pregnant. That was the happiest moment of my life. Gary was happy too, but he looked concerned. I was confused at his mixed emotions. "Gary, ain't you happy with the news? What's bothering you?" "I'm happy for the baby too, but..." "But what?" "I'm a little worried if I'll be able to give a decent life to the baby with my unstable income. Isn't the baby happening too early?" "The baby is happening just at the right time. I want the baby and I'll keep it." Gary was annoyed at my response. He wasn't ready to take up the responsibilities of the baby. I brushed it off with the thought that Gary was just too overwhelmed. Men usually feel overwhelmed by the news of the first pregnancy, and especially if it is not planned, because the baby adds to the responsibility. Honestly, I was also concerned about Gary's unstable income. It's extremely difficult to run a house and provide a good life for a child with just one income. We cannot just depend on my income alone, but I was also sure that once Gary becomes a father, he would understand his responsibilities and everything would be fine. I thought Gary would get serious with his work now, but instead, Gary was becoming reckless day by day. Borrowing money became a habit for him. He always had an urgent and exclusive reason for borrowing money. Sometimes it was on the pretext of paying his staff, and sometimes it was to invest in a new breed of fish. I was getting annoyed by him, but I didn't want to take extreme steps at this point with the baby inside me. I chose to ignore Gary as much as I could and just focus on taking care of myself and my baby. I was still okay to endure his last-minute requests for money until he was polite about the request, as I genuinely wanted to help him and bring him out of the situation. But over time, this request became an order. Earlier, his sentences were, "Honey, I'm so sorry to ask you for a favor again. I need $500 for X, Y, or Z reasons." But now, his sentences are, "Molly, send me $500 ASAP." I tried various means to know the reason for his increasing need for money, but every time I got one answer. "I'm in debt. I took some small loans to pay for my business, and now the interest is soaring. Hence, I need the money to repay the loan amount and the interest." Whenever I refused to pay, he would mess around like a 5-year-old, slamming the door, rattling the cutlery, and making a disgusted and wretched face until I gave him what he wanted. Gary's attitude was getting on my nerves. During the 7th month of my pregnancy, my parents-in-law arranged a baby shower party for me. I felt so grateful to them for doing this. I thanked my parents-in-law wholeheartedly. I was showered with thoughtful gifts from my parents-in-law, their friends and relatives. The function came as a relief to me after many months of stress and despair. I spent a good time with everyone. Besides, I was overjoyed with the gifts. The guests were thoughtful to gift us with all the essentials which the baby would need in the initial few months. We were running tight on budget, and procuring all these items would have been very heavy on our pockets. The next morning when I woke up, I saw the living room was empty and the gifts were gone. I thought Gary would have kept it in the storeroom. I went to the storeroom to check, but there was no sign of any gift. Gary was not at home. I called him, but he didn't answer my call. When he came back, I asked him, "Gary, where did you keep the gifts? I couldn't find them in the house." "Oh, the gifts, I noticed a discomforted look on Gary's face. "Yes, the gifts. What did you do with them?" "I sold them." "What? Why the hell did you sell the gifts?" "I needed the money, so I sold them. Anyways, those gifts were of no use to you." "Have you lost your mind? Those gifts were a relief to our pockets. The gifts were essential items for the baby: clothes, the crib, blankets, strollers, and other toiletries." I was so disappointed on hearing this that I started sobbing. "You know I was relieved to have those gifts. It saved so much money we would have had to spend on buying them. We already have such a tight budget. How could we buy those things again?" "Why are you creating such a scene out of these trivial things?" "Well, those gifts were given by my parents, so I can do anything with them. They are mine." "Excuse me? Those gifts were for the baby. It was not for you to sell it for and fill up your pockets." Fine. Don't give me a moral lecture. I'll get all that stuff when the baby comes out." "How will you get that? Do you have the money?" Gary lowered his gaze, and I knew at once that he didn't have the money. I rolled my eyes and said, "Give me the money you got after selling the gifts." I don't have that." I asked him with a strict voice. "What did you do with the money?" "I used the money in my business." "What the hell, Gary?" He immediately snapped at me. "Oh, please, don't start your preachings again. I'm done with you. You're a sad woman who needs an opportunity to cry over every minor inconvenience." I was infuriated at his words. Gary crossed all his limits, and I couldn't control my rage. "What the hell are you up to? You don't contribute any money to the household expenses. You barely do any household chores. You're surviving on my income. On top of that, you dare to say such words to me? Instead of helping me, you are adding to my problems." "If you have so many problems with me, why don't you leave me? At least I'll be able to live peacefully in my house. I feel suffocated to be around you. You disgust me." I had no energy left to argue with Gary. He was getting unreasonable. I bit my tongue and went into my room, slamming the door behind me. I knew something was wrong with Gary. I suspected him of having an affair and that he was spending the money on his mistress. I decided to dig up the information. That night, I jinxed Gary's soup with a little sedative, which was just enough to put him into a deep slumber. After I ensured that Gary was in deep slumber, I unlocked his phone using his fingerprints. He was in deep sleep to be woken up by this. I scavenged his phone, carefully going through all the emails and chat messages. After an hour of investigation, I found the missing piece of the puzzle which solved the mystery. I was anticipating messages and photos of Gary's mistress, but what I found was far more troublesome than an affair. Gary got into illegal drug activity. Yes, I was shocked too. All this started after he incurred the first loss. To make up for the loss, he took up the illegal task of exporting the drugs through his fish. People who are into fishing businesses know that illegal drugs are transported from one place to another in fish and meats through the cargo. I was unaware of this business. Drugs? Seriously? The email revealed that Gary was reluctant to get into this activity at first, but he was tempted into this for some quick bucks. The dealers lured him as a fix to his loss-making business. Gary started it as a one-time activity and a quick fix to recover his business from the loss. Needless to say, quick money is more addictive than drugs. Eventually, he got more and more involved in this. He started enjoying the illegal business and easy money. This was the reason for his sudden arrogance. Illegal business is a slippery slope, and Gary too slipped towards his downfall. It took him down in no time. The second loss which Gary suffered was bigger and more horrendous. The second time, when the ship overturned, not only the fish but the drugs too were engulfed by the ocean waves. The drug dealers were torturing Gary to pay for the losses, as it was Gary's responsibility to transport it safely. I figured out all this information from the conversation Gary had with the dealer. I could no longer stay with a criminal. Besides, I'm a nurse and I've witnessed the suffering of people because of drug abuse. It is morally and ethically wrong. I collected all the evidence which was required to prove my case, cleaned all the history of tampering, and kept his phone back. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, while Gary was still asleep, I packed my bags and left the house. I went to my colleague's house and narrated everything. She was my trustworthy friend. I was too scared to lodge a police complaint by myself. I was worried that the evidence I collected from Gary's phone would take down a lot of people along with him. So if he or any of his acquaintances get to know that it was me who has exposed them, then I might get into serious trouble. My colleague had a cousin who was a lawyer. She called him up and he was there at her house in no time. The lawyer suggested that I can provide all these details to the police anonymously. The police would conduct an independent investigation, and if my evidence turned out to be true, the police would register the case on their own and arrest the suspect. I would come out clean. I followed the lawyer's suggestion. He had contacts in the police department, and I gave all the evidence to the police as an anonymous person. On the other hand, when Gary woke up in the morning, he saw that I had left the house with some of my belongings. He thought that I was angry with him because of the gifts. He texted me, "I know you, bitch. You're flaring up because of those stupid gifts. You'd be hoping that I'll fall on my knees to apologize to you and beg you to return home. I'm not going to do any of it." I saw his message and I ignored it. I was happy that they had assumed this. It would give me the time to execute my plan without Gary getting suspicious of my absence. I was a 7-month pregnant woman going through this turmoil and plethora of emotions. I was terrified with the thought if Gary finds out that it was me, he might try to harm me or my baby. I was in extreme adversity. As we planned, the police took a week to investigate the matter. The evidence had the contacts and conversations that Gary was having with the dealers. My colleague suggested I stay with her until everything is sorted. After a week, I got a call from the lawyer that the police investigation had confirmed that my evidence was true, and Gary, along with a few others, would be pressed with criminal charges. I didn't know whether to be happy about this news or if I should be sad that Gary would be behind bars. I was still anxious. After a few hours, I got a call from a number. When I answered it, Gary was on the other end. I was trembling with fear, wondering if he already knows the truth. Gary spoke to me in a fearful tone. "Babe, I need your help. The police have arrested me. They have pressed charges of some drug-dealing activity. I'm innocent. I know you are still angry with me for that gift thing, but please help me now. Get me bail and a lawyer. We can sort out our differences when I'm out of here." I sighed with relief that he didn't know the truth. "Gary, I don't want to be associated with any criminal. Forget about the bail. I'm going to break all ties with you. I'm filing for divorce." I hung up the phone without giving him the chance to speak. This was my plan. The lawyer had suggested that once Gary is arrested, I can file for divorce on the grounds of disassociation from a criminal. Neither Gary nor any of his acquaintances would suspect my move, and I could be safe. The news of Gary's arrest reached his parents. After I denied the help, Gary called up his parents and they too refused to help him, stating that it would damage their reputation if they support a criminal. This made my plan easier. I filed for the divorce and it was settled smoothly. A year has passed since that incident. I gave birth to a gorgeous baby girl. When I look back to those times, I pat myself for following my instinct and sleuthing on Gary. Had I not done that, Gary would have still sucked all my money like a parasite, or God knows, he might have harmed me or my baby. Criminals have no morals. The fact that it was me who has given all the evidence to the police remained a secret between me, my colleague, and the lawyer. I'm living with my parents for the time being, until the baby grows up. Gary's parents are helping me with the child support until he's out, which I doubt to be any time soon. Quick money could be an easy way out, but more often than not, it leads to a slippery slope of adversity and crime.